A deadly fire in a silver mine rages out of control.
And I saw real heavy black smoke pouring out. And it just really, it sent a chill down my spine.
Over 90 men were missing, a half a mile under the earth.
You know, after the first few days, I didn't think there was going to be anybody alive.
For 7 days, rescue teams fought smoke and fire.
The gas concentrations up there was so high that one breath he was gone.
In a daring, untested effort, rescuers squeezed down a 4-foot air shaft, trying to locate the miners before they became permanently trapped. "70 miles east of Spokane, Washington, in the mountains of northern Idaho, is an area known as the Silver Valley. Near the end of the 19th century, deposits of gold, silver, and antimony were discovered, and several mines were opened. The largest and most productive was the Sunshine Silver Mine. It was the end of a routine spring day in 1972 for shaft repairman Ben Shepard. He had come off the graveyard shift and was riding the mine train when a coworker asked if he smelled smoke.
Our lead man said, "Man, I smelled smoke. Did you smell that smoke?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And Ray Rudd had just lit a cigarette with a match. Underground, your senses become very acute to different smells. And we realized that we didn't smell the sulfur, we didn't smell pine, that it was a different musty type smell. So, and we talked about it till we got out, that it probably wouldn't hurt to have somebody check it out.
Since no one reported actually seeing a fire, the warning was ignored by supervisors. As Ben Shepard and others were clocking out, close to 200 men were arriving for the day shift. Among them were 28-year-old Ron Flory and 29-year-old Tom Wilkinson. The men were friends and had worked together for 3 years. The mine was huge, with hundreds of miles of tunnels reaching 6,000 feet below the surface. To reach their work area on the 4,800 level, Ron and Tom descended the main hoist in the jewel shaft. They then boarded a mine train for a 2-mile journey to the number 10 shaft, where they went down the final 1,000 feet to the 4,800 level. Sometime after 9 in the morning, Tom thought he smelled smoke. Like Ben Shepard, Ron and Tom didn't think much of it.
Fires in the Sunshine on the main line were fairly frequent. It seemed like people would throw cigarettes out and they'd get into a rag or a piece of timber. There wasn't a lot of fear about fire.
But around 10:30, 2 miners reported smelling smoke on the 3,700-foot level. When they went to investigate, they encountered heavy smoke coming from an abandoned area of the mine. Fire was burning out of control. At the surface, safety engineer Bob Lownhart received an urgent call from his supervisor, instructing him to come to the mine entrance.
I happened to look up at the Sunshine Tunnel, and I saw real heavy smoke pouring out. And it just, really, it sent a chill down my spine. And the only thought I had was, I hope nobody's downwind from that smoke, because it looked very bad.
Around 11:30, Ron and Tom had stopped for lunch, still unaware that a fire had broken out on the 3,700 level, 1,000 feet above them. Just as they were about to eat, Dennis Clapp came through and told them they should evacuate the mine.
But you never know, okay? Won't take any chances.
He instructed them to inform the other men working on the level of the situation. Ron and Tom still believed they weren't in any danger.
We didn't think nothing of it, you know. Yippee, we get out early. But it turned out to be a pretty bad deal.
On the 3,700 level, thick smoke was filling the main hoist shaft. Men were now coming up coughing and staggering. While the smoke was dangerous, the carbon monoxide that accompanied it was lethal. In a high enough concentration, the odorless, tasteless, and colorless gas could kill in a matter of minutes.
Didn't know much about carbon monoxide or any of that. Didn't think anybody was going to die.
That day, many of the senior management were attending the annual stockholders meeting. No designated person was in charge, and shift supervisors were reluctant to order an evacuation. Hours went by, and no action was taken. Finally, just after noon, Bob Lownhart decided to release stench into the mine. Stench is the chemical that gives natural gas its odor, and when smelled by miners, signals an evacuation.
It takes about 20 minutes from the time it's injected until it reaches the working area. By the time that stench reached the working area, the reality of it was that the people who weren't already on their way out wouldn't come out.
The toxic smoke forced the hoist operator to abandon the control room. This shutdown of the main hoist cut off many miners' primary means of escape. Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson had just arrived at the station house with the 7 other men from their level. They signaled for the hoist, unaware that it was no longer working. They called the surface for help. A supervisor told them the situation was being investigated, and the best they could do was send someone to open an air shaft. As a foreman evacuated the 3,700 level, he removed a cover from a borehole, or permanent air shaft. The 4-foot wide shaft led directly down to the 4,800 level. He hoped it might provide clean air to men below. As the smoke grew thicker around them, Ron and Tom found it difficult to breathe. Although mines weren't required to carry breathing apparatus, the Sunshine Mine stocked self-rescuers in the station house. Self-rescuers converted carbon monoxide into breathable air utilizing a chemical reaction. But most miners had never been trained in their proper use.
I had seen them before. I had looked at them, but I really didn't know what they were. I personally had never been trained in the use of a self-rescuer.
Having little faith in their effectiveness, the men went in search of cleaner air. "2,000 feet below the fire, Cager Walter Brown realized the main hoist had stopped working. The only other way to get to the surface was the secondary hoist. It was used primarily to haul ore.
What does it take to get the people out of the mine? You have to have cagers down below loading the people up and a hoistman at the top bringing them out.
When Walter got to the 3,700 level, dozens of miners were waiting. Unlike the main hoist, the smaller one could only carry 9 people. But Walter managed to squeeze 12 men in. On the 4,800 level, Ron Flory, Tom Wilkinson, and some other miners sought relief from the smoke in the mine train shed. The air there was a little bit better. However, after only a few minutes, Tom passed out. Overcome by smoke and fumes, he would die if he didn't get fresh air. Ron knew there might be cleaner air around the borehole on the west end of the level. While Ron moved Tom to a mine train, the other miners developed a plan. They would go to the station house and leave a note for the cager, explaining that they were all waiting in the train shed. As the severity of the situation was finally realized, mine managers requested the help of the Federal Bureau of Mines and mine rescue teams. Since this kind of rescue is such a specialized job, only trained miners could do it. Sunshine had a rescue team, but over half of them were still underground. Word of the fire quickly spread to families throughout the valley. Frances Wilkinson had been a miner's wife for 7 years.
I just drove up here and parked in the parking lot, and there were a lot of people around. And I saw a guy that Tom had worked with before, and I asked him, you know, is Tom down there? And he said, yeah.
Tom slowly came around after Ron moved him near the borehole. The air coming down the shaft was fresh and pushing back the smoke. Ron told him the others would come back as soon as the hoist arrived.
I think the air's clear. There's a door of smoke back there, but it's not coming this way.
At the station house, the other miners left a note for the cager. The phone was not working, and no one responded to their signal for the hoist. In minutes, the smoke overwhelmed them. Shortly before 1, mine safety engineer Bob Lownhart and 2 other miners entered the mine wearing breathing apparatus. They needed to test the levels of oxygen and carbon monoxide inside.
Well, the flame safety lamp was still burning. It was diminished a little bit, but it was still burning. But when I tested for carbon monoxide, before I had half finished the test, that is, you draw a sample through a test tube, before half the volume of air was drawn through, the tube was black. So I knew immediately that we had a deadly amount of carbon monoxide.
Many miners returned to help as word of the fire spread throughout the community. Ben Shepard was immediately handed the phone in the foreman's office. It was his friend Doug Wiedrich on the 5,000 level.
He's one of the toughest, most rugged individuals I've ever known, and he's not afraid of anything. Yet he had a lot of fear in his voice. And Doug said, he said, "Shep, you've got to get us out of here. We're dying." And I said, they're doing everything they can. I knew that there was nothing I could do to help him other than just reassure him that help's coming.
On the 3,700 level, the secondary hoist suddenly stopped working. Walter Brown found the hoist man overcome by smoke. The operator died in his arms. Both hoists were now inoperable. He had to get out. He had been in the smoke for over an hour. Even though he used the self-rescuer, the carbon monoxide in his body had built up to such an extent that he simply collapsed. Bob Blaunhart and miners Don Beener and Larry Hawkins were continuing to explore the extent of the fire when they found Walter sprawled across the tracks.
Don Beener took his breathing apparatus off and started to extend, his arm with the facepiece in his hand, like something like, "Here, this is oxygen, take this."
Walter told them what he had witnessed.
As soon as the facepiece was in position, he said, "They're all dead back there."
As the four of them made their way back to the mine train, Don collapsed. Without his mask, he was overcome by the smoke in less than 20 seconds. Moments later, Larry Hawkins' breathing apparatus malfunctioned.
He said, "I can't get any air." And I said, "Hit your bypass." He said, "I tried it, it won't work. I gotta go." So the last thing I tried to do at that point was to pick Don Beener up and put him in one of those ore cars. But it was, it was a narrow drift location, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't lift him high enough. So I just gently put him back down and leave him, which was one of the most terrible things I ever had to do in my life.
Bob Blaunhart helped Walter Brown back up the jewel shaft and out of the mine. It was 1:30, an hour and a half after the initial call to evacuate was issued. 80 men had made it to the surface, but over 90 more were still trapped. A deadly fire raged deep in the tunnels of the Sunshine Silver Mine in northern Idaho. Poisonous carbon monoxide saturated the air. After the call to evacuate was issued, 80 men made it to the surface, but over 90 were still missing, and mine rescue teams had yet to arrive. Tom Wilkinson and Ron Flory had sought refuge in a drift near an air shaft on the 4,800-foot level. They were waiting for other miners to tell them that the hoist was ready to bring them up. They had no idea that all hoists were now inoperable, and the other miners on their level were dead.
I'll wait here in case they get back. All right.
After waiting for what seemed an eternity, Ron decided to look for the other men. Ron didn't get far when he saw the outline of a mine train. Slumped over the controls was one of the miners he and Tom had been waiting for.
Timmy! Timmy!
He checked for a pulse, but was unable to find one. He immediately went back to tell Tom what he found. By 2 o'clock, 2 hours after the alarm went out, mine rescue teams began arriving from all over Idaho and as far away as Montana, Utah, and British Columbia. Dennis Clapp, who had warned Tom and Ron of the fire, waited for word of what to do next.
Everybody was worried. Nobody had experienced anything like this before, and everybody was mostly just waiting around to find out what we could do. They was calling in help from all the other mines. Everybody wanted to know who got out, who was still down.
With half of the Sunshine rescue team trapped in the mine, the rescue effort needed more men familiar with Sunshine's layout to go underground.
Here to demonstrate to you how to use this rescue.
Ben Shepard, Dennis Clapp, and Don Caparelli received a crash course in mine rescue. The Bureau of Mines instructors stressed that their lives depended on the proper use of their breathing equipment.
This mask, I can't tell you enough, it has to be put on airtight. These straps have to be tight.
He taught us about the apparatus, he taught us about the gases, he taught us how to don and undon and how to purge the machine. He really made every mine rescue man that went through there understand that if they did something wrong, they were dead.
Sealing in right in here. You need to make sure you have that. When you get down in the mine, you won't get any
He
signals.
kept pounding in our heads. You lose the seal on your machine, you die. The gas concentrations up there was so high that one breath, he was gone.
Action down there, it breaks your seal, you're a dead man. So please, pay attention.
It was just a crash course in training. It was more than just walking around in the mine locating people. There was a tremendous amount of manual labor to be done before we can even get to where the people are trapped.
When Ron returned, he told Tom about the dead train operator.
I think it's a good idea if we go back to...
They both felt they had to go to the motor shed and find out what happened to the rest of the men. When they got there, they found 4 more of their group. They were all dead. The carbon monoxide had poisoned them so quickly, they were frozen in mid-motion. Horrified by the discovery, Ron and Tom knew they had to get out of there and fled back to the borehole. By 3, the rescue teams were ready to enter the mine. Estimates based on shift logs now put the number of miners missing at 93. Before looking for survivors, the rescuers would try to determine the location of the fire. Then they would check the condition of the hoists. The rescue teams were divided into groups of 4 men. Wearing 40-pound Mackay breathing apparatuses that carried 2 hours of oxygen, they entered the mine. Harry Coffer was on one rescue team.
I knew the danger was there, especially going back in the smoke. The further we get into the smoke, consciously, we're concerned about any leaks, so we'll tighten our mask. And by the time we got to 10 shaft, we could see that the smoke was recirculating, coming up from below, going across 31, and going down the shaft.
The smoke obscured everything. Rescuer John Lang.
When you walked back into the smoke, you linked up, and everybody had a link line that you tied to the man in front of you. I couldn't see nothing. I mean, you couldn't see from here to you. You could barely see your hand right there.
The rescue teams were forced to retreat because smoke and heat blocked their path. In an effort to clear the mine, officials reversed the flow of the ventilation fans, hoping to pull the smoky air out. Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson were back near the air shaft. The temperature had climbed to over 100 degrees because of the fire burning above them. They were hot, tired, and thirsty. Because they hadn't eaten their lunches when the fire broke out, they had food, but not much. They decided to ration their lunches. They had no idea when or if help would arrive. The first rescue teams returned to the surface by 4:30. They had discovered 5 bodies, but not one live person. Family and friends lined the parking lot, hoping and praying.
They had a rope stretched across to keep, and they put up chairs. Red Cross was up there feeding them sandwiches, and they'd just sit there wait. They'd be sitting there when you went in, they'd be sitting there when you came out.
It was a lot of people, but everybody was just kind of, how could I explain it? You know, it was like one big family. Everybody was there for everybody else. I didn't think Tom was dead. I just knew it in my heart that he wasn't.
88 miners had now been missing for over 6 hours, and the fire was still burning underground. By evening, news crews from around the country began reporting on what was becoming the second worst disaster in U.S. mining history. The unimaginable had happened at the Sunshine Silver Mine in northern Idaho. A fire more than 3,000 feet below the surface had left 5 miners dead and more than 80 missing. Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson had survived the fire and were awaiting rescue. On day 2 of the disaster, rescue crews throughout the mine attempted to build bulkheads to stop the smoke. Ben Shepard and several newly trained rescuers were sent to the 3100 level. The image of what they saw has never left them.
I can remember the bodies, and what struck probably everybody on the team was that these guys were there, and they were in a relaxed state. You know, I mean, they'd obviously been having coffee and a sandwich. They never heeded this as an emergency.
Don Caparelli was just 22 years old.
We had to go in and we had to step over and walk around these people, and you know, it just didn't click before until I actually seen what had happened. I wasn't quite so gung-ho now. When you see your friends that have died there, it makes you realize that it's really serious.
The rescuers were told to leave the dead for now. They had work to do if they were going to locate any survivors.
You just couldn't show the emotions that you were really feeling. So you stuffed that down inside and tried to help and do the best you can.
4,800 feet underground, Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson had set up camp. All they could do was wait in the one spot they knew where the air was still good. Using old boards and burlap sacks, they made beds and took turns trying to get sleep. 72 hours after the mine was evacuated, rescuers reached the 3,700-foot level. A cave-in caused by the fire stopped them from reaching the main hoist.
The fire started up on the 3,400 level and ultimately burned out enough timber that the whole thing collapsed. And when it caved in, it not only plugged the haulage way, but it also broke the 12-inch diameter compressed air line. It took out the 13,800 volt power line.
The collapse had caused a loss of power to the main hoist, which was crucial in reaching the lower levels. Repairs would take days to complete, and the air was still poisonous. The rescuers had now reached an impasse. They had recovered 30 of the 93 missing miners. They were running out of time to find anybody alive. They needed another plan.
You know, after the first few days, I didn't think there was going to be anybody alive. The motivation was just to get a job done, you know, after that. And of course, you know, there's always a chance. There's always miracles.
You called for us? Yeah.
On the 4th day, the Bureau of Mines proposed lowering a capsule through a 4-foot wide air shaft. Rescuers knew men had been working near the shaft and believed this location was the best place to find someone alive. Although the 2-man capsule had been built for the Atomic Energy Commission, it had never been used in a mine rescue. Rescuers felt the most dangerous aspect of the operation would be traversing down the 1,000-foot shaft, which was irregularly shaped and lined with loose pieces of rock.
And I thought, they're going to send that capsule down that with somebody in it? They're crazy. If a rock falls out and jams that thing up, you can't pull it back up again. You break the cable. And then what are you going to do? He's stuck down there.
Bureau of Mine Inspector Wayne Kanak was chosen to lead the operation.
They still hadn't explored many areas of the mine. They had only discovered about 40 people when we got there. There still were 50 people missing yet. So until you get the last miner out, there's always hope. And that's the reason, I guess, that we kept going with our missions and doing what we did.
The biggest problem with the plan was the location of the capsule. It was in Nevada and would take 2 days to get to the mine. But with no other choice, rescuers called for it. After being trapped for over half a week, Ron and Tom decided to go to the station house to try the phone again. There, they found 3 more dead miners. The hoist had never returned to take them out. Ron tried the phone, hoping somebody would answer his call. But the line was down. They were alone, 4,800 feet underground. It was the first time they realized the fire had affected more than just their level. The men took whatever food and cigarettes they could find and quickly returned to their makeshift camp. Outside, the mood was dismal. Each new body discovered brought anguished cries from another family. Rescuers were instructed not to tell anyone the details of what they saw underground.
I had to walk past the families, all the wives and families and children. I'm this 22-year-old kid that's just been in the mine, and I know that this husband is dead. I just seen this. So it's really hard for me to have to walk by these people, and of course they're all coming over asking you questions, you know, and it's just really difficult, really difficult.
I'll be honest with you, probably from the second day of the fire till for a long time, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd cry because of the loss of life and the condition the bodies were in when they came out. It was just a terribly sad time for us. It was heartbreaking for everybody.
But Frances Wilkinson believed her husband was alive, no matter how grim it looked.
The first night that I was up here, I sat in the car and prayed. And I just felt a peace come over me, like God was saying, I have him in my hand. And I knew then that he was okay. And from that moment on, no matter what anybody told me, it didn't matter, I just knew.
By the end of the 5th day, the death toll had reached 42. According to officials, 51 men were still unaccounted for, and the chances of saving any of them was decreasing by the minute. A rescue capsule, still hundreds of miles away, was their only hope. For nearly a week, rescue teams trying to find trapped miners had been blocked from reaching them by cave-ins and heavy smoke. They had developed a daring plan to send a rescue capsule down a narrow shaft. Underground, Tom Wilkinson and Ron Flory had managed to survive in a small air pocket, scrounging food from dead miners to keep them alive. Finally, 7 days after the call to evacuate had been given, the rescue capsule arrived. Constructed by the Atomic Energy Commission, the capsule had never been tested in an emergency situation. But it was the rescuers' last chance at reaching the lower levels. Wayne Kanak was in charge of the mission.
All our people seemed to think if there was an area in a mine that would have had live people at this 4,800 level was an area, because of the fact that it was on fresh air all the time during the mine disaster.
Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson had now been trapped on the 4,800 level for a week. They were almost out of food. If help didn't arrive soon, they weren't sure how much longer they could last. Rescuers in other parts of the mine were still battling the effects of the fire.
The last time I came out, they had us go over for blood tests. And Dr. Nettinger drew my blood and he said, "Your carboxy level is 54. I have checked dead men with lower carboxy levels than you have." He said, "You can't go back in."
When I got outside, I was asked to call one of the local doctors. He wanted to know how many people they could expect at the hospital. And I said, "Well, based on what I found, I don't think you'll see anybody." But until we knew that nobody else was alive in the mine, we always had the hope that we would find someone.
At 9 o'clock that evening, the capsule got its trial run. The smoke had cleared from the 3,700 level. Wayne Kanak and another rescuer would descend through a 4-foot wide air shaft to the level below.
At the time, it didn't seem to be very scary to us. We just were doing our job, and there's no question about the fact that there is dangers, but you try to minimize those through the training and the equipment that you've got.
The capsule was lowered into the shaft by a winch. Equipped with 6 hours of oxygen, the men started their 1,100-foot journey.
As the capsule is lowered down the hole, our hands would keep the capsule unit centered so it wouldn't hang up. Now, it wasn't necessary that we guided it all the time. We just had to guide it in some of the narrow spots and some of the crooked spots. Otherwise, it went pretty much on its own.
They continuously tested the air for carbon monoxide. The levels were acceptable.
Looking good. Good.
As they were descending, they were also laying a telephone cable so they could communicate with the rescuers on top.
We had constant communication with the hoistmen through a phone by means of a phone that was attached to a lifeline, so we could tell him to either go slower or faster or just where we were and if we had any problems.
But the descent was by no means smooth. Because the shaft was only a foot wider than the capsule, jutting rock slowed their progress. The rock had to be removed.
And we had a scaling bar, with a short bar with a pointed end on it and a flat end, and you just chip or remove the loose rock that was on the sides of the hole.
Less than 1,000 feet below the rescuers, Ron and Tom, weak from hunger, were giving up hope. It was impossible for them to imagine why rescuers were taking so long to reach them. They had no idea that the whole mine had been shut down because of the fire, or how many men had died. After going down about 150 feet, the rescuers hit a dogleg, or crooked part in the air shaft. The rescuers were now forced to try and shift the capsule around, hoping to bypass the obstruction. But that didn't work. They were going to have to dislodge the rocks, wasting precious time. After 4 hours, the capsule was brought back to the 3,700 level. The men were exhausted. They had not been able to chip away enough rock to let the capsule go deeper. But work had to continue. 2 more rescuers worked through the night to clear the debris. Rescuers hoped that if there were men alive, they could hold on just a few more hours. It had been 1 week since the Sunshine Silver Mine disaster. Rescuers trying to reach the lower levels of the mine were forced to travel down a 4-foot air shaft in a last-ditch effort to find survivors. After working all night, different teams of rescuers were finally able to clear a path for the capsule. Shortly after 7 in the morning on the 8th day, Wayne Kanak and another rescuer reached the 4,800 level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you all right?
All right.
They tested the air. It was okay.
All right, just hold steady here. We're going to take a look around.
Well, it's very eerie. You don't see and hear anything. The temperature is about 110 degrees. It's hot.
As the rescuers began moving east in the main drift, they encountered smoke and quickly put on their breathing apparatus.
We go approximately 100, 200 feet, stop, check the air, and hook up the sound power phone with the cable, call the base, tell them what we're doing, what we've seen. And we disconnect from the cable at that time and go another 200 or 300 feet.
Near the borehole, Ron Flory was waking up from a nap. Out the corner of his eye, he saw what appeared to be a light flashing.
Look, I think I see some lights, for real. Man, you're crazy. No, man, take a look, for real.
He woke Tom and told him he had seen something, but Tom didn't believe it. Ron insisted and turned the light off on the train to be sure. Finally, they both saw the lights and began hitting the rails to attract the rescuers' attention.
We hear some rapping on the rails. And obviously, then we know that there's some live miners there. We yelled at them to stay there because we knew that the air was good where we were, and we knew the air was good where they were, but there was about 300 to 500 feet between us that we didn't know how the air was.
Wayne Kanak had found Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson.
I think it was kind of a disbelief on their part that somebody was actually there. They seemed to be very coherent and responsive to what we asked them.
Kanak phoned the men above.
Hey, we got a couple of survivors down here. They hurt. They're in good shape, fine shape. Ron Flory and Tom Wilkinson.
I think at that moment right then, it was just a relief. You knew that it was over. I mean, that they'd found you, that you were going to get out.
People outside heard the news and were overcome with joy.
All we heard was there was 2 men alive. Then the mine manager came over looking for us and told us that it was Tom and Ron. I can't even describe how it felt. It was just joy, elation, peace, happiness, laughter.
Ron Flory went up to the 3,700 level first.
I'm so happy you guys came by.
He insisted to the rescuers he was going to wait there for his partner.
When we got down to the main station there, Jewel, they wanted to put us on a stretcher and carry us out on stretchers, and we had decided that when we walked in, we were going to walk out.
When they finally emerged from the mine, they were blinded by camera flashes.
We just started heading out, and then when they opened them doors and the lights really hit us, and the people were just hollering. I just couldn't picture it, you know, the people there at that time. There were just a godly amount of people. I really cheered us on. I really hollered.
It truly was a miracle to see those two. I can actually remember looking around and everybody, even those that I had recognized I already lost family that were standing there, everybody had a smile on their face, a big smile. It was a joyous time.
The men were taken to the Shoshone Community Hospital. Aside from losing weight and being dehydrated, they were in reasonably good condition. They were kept overnight and released the following morning.
But when Tom and Ron were found, it was like, all right. It was like a shot in the arm. You know, and then you had a spark of hope out here that these people could be, there could still be somebody down there alive.
3 days after Ron and Tom walked out of the mine, the rest of the miners' bodies were recovered. There were no more survivors. In all, 91 men lost their lives, making the Sunshine Mine disaster the second worst in U.S. mining history. Don Caparelli was one of the last men to leave the mine after the rescue effort stopped.
So when we come out of the mine, it was empty. There was no people there anymore. Everybody was gone. So I got home and I went in the house, and of course my wife greeted me at the door. So that's when I kind of lost control. So I went in the bathroom and I just cried and cried. But then I had to take a wash rag and wipe my face, and it was okay, and then I had to go visit with my company. But it was okay. It was okay. And you know, after all I'd went through and with my friends and stuff, it was okay to cry. It was really okay.
It's a situation where the real agony came to me many days later, after things slowed to a normal pace, and I had time to contemplate. It was then that things really hit me hard.
As a result of the fire, the cause of which was never fully determined, the Federal Mine Safety and Health Administration was created.
Perhaps the 91 caskets should be present in this room. Their silent voices would be heard and must be heard, because there are men who again will descend a hole in the ground named Sunshine.
Aside from tightening safety codes, the new agency mandated that all miners carry self-regulators and have the training to use them. But the real lesson of the tragedy was much more personal.
I think mostly is you don't take anything for granted. And you have to put your faith into something, because you don't know from one day to the next what life's going to deal you.
The Sunshine Mine closed its doors in 2001. But the memory of the tragic event lives on. A statue inscribed with the names of the 91 men who lost their lives stands as a constant reminder to all those who visit the Silver Valley.